Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the 2021-2022 Nystrand Center Educational Forum. I am so honored to be introducing our esteemed guests today. Every individual on this call has demonstrated outstanding contributions to the field of education in Kentucky. And I know I speak for all of us here at U of L when I express our gratitude for their presence and contributions to the conversation today. Welcome to Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman, Dr. Marty Polio, Dr. Jason Glass, Dr. Lori Gonzalez, Dr. Amanda Ellis, Rick Smith, and Dr. Ty Handy. We are so thrilled that you are here. Welcome also to our guests who have joined the call. The Nystrand Center of Excellence in Education is at the heart of so much of the work we do here in the College of Education Human Development at U of L. Our primary goal here is to support our students, providing them with an excellent academic experience so that they can enter the workforce and make a positive impact. As an educator myself, this work holds a special significance when it comes to students being prepared to enter the field of education. The Nystrand Center is a reflection of our belief that we are at our very best as educators when we are in collaboration and partnership with one another. The center connects higher education to the community and to K-12 schools. And that connection has proven critical to the success of our schools, our students, and teachers. I am so excited for this conversation today. We all know it has been a difficult couple of years, and we are taking this opportunity to reflect on the challenges we have faced and where we are headed next. I will now turn things over to our moderator and the director of the Nystrand Center, Dr. Geneva Stark.
Thank you, Dr. Lingo, for your greetings, your introduction, and also your leadership as the Dean of Education at the University of Louisville. And again, thank you for panelists for being here today, because right now we are in critical times in our country. We are dealing with multiple pandemics, and not only COVID-19, but we're talking about racism and social justice, educational disparities, economic disparities, access and opportunity, mental health, anti-Asian attacks, the insurrection, pre-filed bills by state legislators, voter suppression, critical race theory versus diversity, equity, inclusion, and an attack on educators. And right now, our constituents across the Commonwealth of Kentucky, they need to hear and they want to hear from the leaders to know, how do they move forward? What is the education trajectory for the Commonwealth of Kentucky? And again, I want to thank you all for being here, because it is indeed a conversation. As I reached out to individuals across the state, of course, I was surprised at the magnitude of questions that came. And of course, we would not be able to tackle all of those questions, but we do want to provide them with information to know that what your thoughts are. You know, what do you want to do as leaders, and what are we doing? Because we all know all too often, sometimes our community, they don't know exactly what we're doing. And so they ask for, oh, why are they not doing this? And we are doing that. So how do we make sure that the connection exists between K-12, higher education, and the community? And so you are here as leaders in your particular areas. And so again, it is indeed a conversation that we're going to, that has to happen, because people want to know. So again, thank you all for being here today. Truly, truly appreciate it. And I want each one of you to introduce yourselves before we get into the questions that our constituents have from across the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So we're going to lead in with our illustrious leader, Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stark Pittman. This is Jacqueline Coleman. I am currently serving as the Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Kentucky, but I came directly to this office that you see me in right now from the Assistant Principal's office, and spent my career as a classroom teacher, a high school basketball coach, and eventually a school administrator mainly in rural Kentucky. Quite frankly, is where most most of those places were. And it's an honor to be here with you all. I see all these faces of these great leaders that I have, the opportunity to work with so often. And I'm so grateful to learn from them along the way as well. So thank you all for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dr. Glass.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a delight to be with you, and thank you so much for the invitation. I'm looking so much to this conversation and really have tremendous respect for everyone who's on this panel. I'm Jason Glass. I'm proud to be Kentucky's Commissioner of Education and Chief Learner. And in my background, I've most recently been a superintendent in 2 districts in Colorado. Before that, I served as the state education chief in Iowa. I've done consulting work in a number of different states, mostly in school human resources and human capital development areas, and also served as a district administrator, worked at the Colorado Department of Education in various roles, taught at the university level, and started my career as a high school history teacher here in Kentucky. I'm a 3rd generation Kentucky educator and proud to be back and proud to be in Kentucky right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Glass. Dr. Gonzalez.
Hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great technology. I am provost at the University of Louisville. I had my 7th month anniversary this week, so I'm at the great school. I'm very happy to be here. I'm a speech language pathologist by education. I was a speech pathologist in the public schools in Rockcastle County, which is my home county, before I went on for my doctoral degree. And thereafter, I've been in higher education. So I've been a provost, a chief academic officer, a dean, and now I'm at U of L. I'm looking forward to, I'm glad to be back home in Kentucky and looking forward to sharing how U of L is trying to transform lives to transform Kentucky. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rick Smith.
Hi, glad to be with you, Dr. Stark. I appreciate the invitation. Certainly honored to be amongst such an esteemed group of people here. Again, my name is Rick Smith. I have the pleasure of serving as the Associate Vice President of Career and Workforce Development, or Workforce and Economic Development for the Council on Postsecondary Education. I think we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about that and what that means here shortly. But I call myself a native Louisvillian, but really I'm a military transplant. My parents are from Danville, Kentucky. So my roots are in the Commonwealth, but we retired in Louisville in the 70s. So I grew up out in Fern Creek, and my undergraduate degree is from the University of Louisville. So always glad to be a part of the University of Louisville. But moved back to Kentucky after a career as a television news reporter, hospital administrator in a number of cities around this great country. And then most recently, the past 6-7 years working in higher education. At Kentucky State University, the Kentucky College of Art and Design, and then at the Northern Pennsylvania Regional College. So glad to be with you to join this conversation. We're doing great work at CPE on this very important topic.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Dr. Polio.
Hi there. Thank you, Dr. Stark. Marty Polio, Superintendent, Jefferson County Public Schools. I've spent the past 25 years in JCPS. Just about every role you could be in. So I've been a teacher and a coach, basketball coach, an athletic director, and assistant principal for 10 years at 2 different schools before I somehow managed my way into this job of superintendent of JCPS, but very proud to be the superintendent of JCPS and working hard to make sure that we meet the needs of all of our students and really look towards the future here of JCPS. My mom was a teacher in JCPS. My dad was actually a teacher and a coach in the old Louisville public school system. So 2nd generation teacher. Also got my doctorate degree from the University of Louisville. So go Cards.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. Dr. Ellis.
Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be with all of you. I started as a science teacher, middle school science teacher, curriculum coach, and elementary principal, and moved my way into the Kentucky Department of Education for nearly 8 years in multiple leadership roles, really focusing on teaching and learning as an associate commissioner and deputy. and most recently joined the Council on Postsecondary Education. So I do not have a degree from U of L, but I have a student or a child that's at U of L, and am a really proud grad of IU, but with my doctorate at UK, and I have had the pleasure of learning about connecting all the dots between K-12 and post-secondary and opportunities for students through serving as a partial professor on the side and fully engaged educator. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you, Dr. Stark.
Hey, thank you. And again, thank you all for being here. And we're still waiting for Dr. Handy, but we're going to move on with the questions. And the question for each one of you all, as we're dealing with the pandemic, and we know that there are challenges, well, what are some of the great things that are happening in your space? Because all too often we just focus on the challenges. What are some of the good things that's happening in the spaces that you occupy? We're going to start with Dr. Polio. What are some of the great things that's happening in Jefferson County Public Schools?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to note that I think this pandemic, although has been extremely difficult and the most difficult thing we have faced in this district. And I say this, Dr. Stark, that, I think this is probably the second toughest time in Jefferson County Public Schools to work here, to lead here, since probably 1976, when mandatory desegregation occurred, and the combination of two districts, the city and the county, within about a 6-month period, and all the unrest that went with that. But I think the past 20 months has been probably second to that in the degree of difficulty and what we've had to do as educators all throughout this country. But speaking about Jefferson County, we know how hard it is. We thought this year would be, back to a more normal time, and it has been more difficult than ever, dealing with the contact tracing and the quarantining and the rising numbers. And now great news today with the vaccination of 5 to 11-year-olds. And, and I'll just say this is how excited people are. We had a press conference today at 9 a.m. By 12:30, we had nearly 2,000 kids signed up to get the vaccination next weekend. 2,000 within 3 hours of launching our website. So it could be double that by now. But I think more than anything, it has really galvanized our community around what we have to do. I think it's inspired some important change that is needed around the use of technology, the use of innovation in the classroom, things that we were forced to do. I think it has forced us to move towards a more standards-based grading model. When we look at teacher, we see now like 64 of our schools right now immersed into work with Thomas Gusky on standards-based grading. I don't think that would have happened without this. I think as we focus in on the wraparound supports that we give to kids, it's probably I shouldn't say probably, it's what's been needed for many years. But it's taken a pandemic, I think, to really spur us in that and really give everyone the empathy that is needed to meet the needs of kids. And finally, I think it is getting us to look long-term at the supports we need to give kids, specifically when we talk about our essential standards academically, to have kids catch up. And I think that, yes, kids have fallen behind because of the pandemic, but I think we now have a roadmap of how we catch kids up that we will use for many years as a result of what's happened during this pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. Lieutenant Governor Coleman, what are some of the things that's happening in your space that you are most proud of that you'd like to share?
Thank you. And Dr. Polio, I have to say that, thinking about what you all have managed to accomplish with an enormous amount of students during such a tough time, I just, I hope that you'll always have support from us. And I continue to be impressed with your team and your focus. So thank you. Thank you for
very
that.
much.
I would say from my vantage point, it has been a really long time since Kentucky has had an education first administration. As a matter of fact, it's probably been my entire lifetime. The last time we had a teacher in this office was before I was born. And it should come as no surprise that when Martha Lane Collins was governor, She ushered in one of the greatest economic development projects Kentucky's ever seen with Toyota in Georgetown. And the difference that that investment in that industry has made in Kentucky, will spawn generations. And so I'm just honored to be able to serve alongside Governor Beshear. Not only did he have the wherewithal to pick a teacher to run with him several years ago. But he also stands by his word and listens to educators, and their voices are heard. And it should come as no surprise that when we were first elected to office, we ran on an education first agenda. It's been reflected in both of our budget proposals with record investment in teacher raises, in instructional resources, textbooks, technology, all the things that have been cut over the years. And, that I think those values and the way that we talk about education now has taken a very different tone than it had before. And so it should come as no surprise that now we're looking at the second time around in our lives where we're having an economic development boom. And it's because we have an education first administration. There is no other explanation for it. When you put education and our kids and our families first, our communities prosper, businesses take notice, and they want to be a part of it. And so we were able to announce the largest economic development project in Kentucky's history just a few weeks ago, with a $6 billion investment from Ford that's going to create 5,000 new jobs and usher us into the future of building the electric vehicle. And when I think about the opportunity that has created for our kids, because this is what I say, I always make sure that I point this out when we talk about economic development. It's really likely that the first wave of employees that those two battery plants are going to hire are probably about 14 to 18 years old right now, today. And so the question is, how are we preparing this new workforce for the jobs of the future? And I could not be more happy to serve along with a governor who puts that mentality first. And so I just know we have such great things to come.
Thank you very much. Dr. Gonzalez, I know you're celebrating a 7-month anniversary this week. So just share with us some of the things that you've been able to think about or accomplish at the University of Louisville. What's happening?
Sure. I'm going to echo what the superintendent says, because we get students after they've come through the public school system.
Mhm.
And so the issues that we have to deal with from K-12 carry on, and particularly mental health issues. So we're facing the challenge of mental health issues. We're trying to add more mental health counselors and telehealth and things like that. That's a challenge we're trying to overcome. But one of the reasons I came here is I love our cardinal principles. They're principles that we are supposed to live by. And the one that motivates me every day is noble purpose. I feel like education has the noble purpose of creating a citizenry that is engaged, that supports democracy, that will carry us forward. So we have created this fall the Center for Engaged Learning at the university. And this will focus on 2 aspects right now, and we'll grow it. But the first is experiential learning. We want our students to take what they learn in the classroom and go out in the community and work with our community partners to apply knowledge, to help solve problems, to learn about people, to learn about differences, to learn the thread of humanity that links us all together, no matter what our backgrounds. And then they can come back and again, with reflection, take that back into the classroom. I'm really proud of that, because I think it will create the workforce that the Lieutenant Governor is going to be needing in the future for Kentucky. We want an educated workforce that understands how to work with people. So that's one of the aspects. The other is undergraduate research, and that will be students learning to solve the problems of our society, working hand in hand with faculty members. So those 2 things have kicked off, and we've been doing those things at the institution forever, but we're pulling resources together so we can make sure every student has that experience. We're going to be working to get paid internships, particularly for our students who are under-resourced under-resourced and are Pell eligible, because oftentimes they have to work. They can't take a month off or 2 months off to go into a company and work. So we want to make sure that we give those students the same opportunity. Engagement with the community is the real key. No matter where this student goes back, if they go back to my home county of Rockcastle County, they'll be a leader in that county because they have a bachelor's degree. And so we want to help them understand their role in creating a better Kentucky for all of us. We have so many good things going on. We were just chosen as one of the most beautiful campus in Kentucky. So that was good news for us. But really, it's the part of educating our students for the future. That's the real winning story here. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Dr. Glass. Mhm.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited about all the things I'm hearing from my friends and colleagues. So
Yes.
ditto on all of that. I'll add three other things. One, I'm excited about the resources that we have available in Kentucky now to create experiences for students over the next 3 years that's come in through all of the federal COVID relief funds. We know that our students have really had just a really rough and terrible experience over the past 18 months with COVID. But what we're going to be able to do with these resources going forward is hopefully give them some of the best learning experiences of their lives. I think we'll be able to measure our success if our students 3 years from now can say, you know, COVID was really terrible. I missed my friends. I fell behind in learning. There was just a lot that I missed out of. But what my community, what my school district did for me in the next 3 years, those were the best 3 years of my life. So I hope that we shoot for that and we have the resources to do it. A second positive that I see emerging from the pandemic, during all of the disruption that we had with COVID, we really learned about a lot of ways that we could deliver instruction. We know that some of those were remote. A lot of our students struggled with that, but some of our students really liked it and succeeded. We saw a decline in bullying and issues like that, where students were feeling threatened, and some students want to continue with that. So I see districts picking that up, making that option available. Some of our districts experimenting with different educational delivery models. I see districts that are working to find ways to support homeschool families. I think that's a great opportunity to engage with those youth in a community. So I see the expansion of learning options happening, and I think that's a really good thing too. And then finally, just on the heels of the education summit that we had earlier this week, we released this initiative and sort of new direction for the state that we're calling United We Learn. At the heart of that is a educational reform effort that is radical in that it's focused on learning. And that may not sound so radical, but so many reform efforts over the years have been focused on testing or measurement systems or governance systems. There are all sorts of things that are really high level, macro level policies. But what would happen if for the next 30 years, we focused on the experiences that our students are having? And gave our students experiences that prepared them for that lightning fast workforce that the Lieutenant Governor was talking about, the interconnected world, the automated world that's already here, and gave them the kinds of experiential learning experiences that really Dr. Gonzalez talked about is happening at the University of Louisville. How do we proliferate that and bring it to scale? So that's what I'm excited about. And I hope that that effort really takes off in Kentucky. And I think we've got the capacity and the foundation laid to do just that.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you, Dr. Glass. Mr. Smith.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to hear everything that's being said. It's not the first time I've heard it, but it rings in my ears every time, and I get excited about it. Just a little bit about CPE, and I don't want to steal any thunder from my colleague Amanda Ellis, who's also on here. CPE, our president is Dr. Aaron Thompson. I think many people know Dr. Thompson. Matter of fact, I've not been many places around the Commonwealth that people don't know Dr. Thompson, and that's a great thing because he is a educator who is really committed to education, post-secondary education in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. CPE, basically what we're the higher education coordinating agency for the Commonwealth. Really came about at the Post-Secondary Education Act in '97 is really what spawned CPE. So we work with all the state colleges, 2 years and 4 years, and we're the licensure body for a lot of the independent colleges as well. So it's a great body of work. What this pandemic has done for us, what it has done for everyone, it's really forced us to somewhat reinvent ourselves, reinvent how we deliver education. Dr. Polio was talking about the impact on certainly K through 12 there's huge impact on post-secondary as well. Education, we had to find different ways to educate, and thank goodness we've got these great new tools of technology at our disposal right now that we were able to quickly adapt and not miss a beat. I'll speak a little bit more later on during the session about some of the things that we're doing in workforce and working with our state, with our workforce development friends, and helping generate and support some of the great things that the Lieutenant Governor talked about as far as the new businesses coming. We've got all these wonderful businesses coming. Well, we want to keep that pipeline going of workforce. We want to keep our talented folks right here at home. So we're working with all of our schools to make sure that we're going to be able to supply all of their needs. So I'll stop there. I know we'll get into more of it a little bit later on.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Amanda Ellis, I know that you all work together, but you have the K-20 perspective. So please bring it to us today. What are your thoughts?
So not to duplicate anything my colleagues have said, I think what I've seen overall is the focus of individual needs. And that is from K-12 all the way through post-secondary. We talked about mental health. That has been a huge piece on how to support that. The wraparound supports now we can offer with the resources that Commissioner Glass mentioned is an opportunity of a lifetime for us to really get this right and do it well all the way through the transition into post-secondary. And the other thing I had written down is even meeting basic needs. We talked about food scarcity. We talked about, when we were right in the middle, universities and K-12 systems turned on a dime to ensure students had food. The amount of lunches and meals that were prepared and delivered to families, really, I felt like our Commonwealth came together to do what was right by families because they wanted to take care of basic needs. And we know that cognitively, you're not going to gain and grow without those basic needs being met. And I saw that collectively across the board for all ages. And I found that to be the positive. If we have to find the positive out of such a rough time, that's what I would add to that is seeing that as a collective effort and really focus on the individuals, not just a one size fits all, because it didn't fit but one. Everybody had their very unique experiences and reactions to the pandemic and how that impacted families and the individual students. And I felt like our institutions, of all education institutions, really took that very seriously and went above and beyond to serve our community. And I don't think took it for granted by any means, but really it was a priority. And that was encouraging to me. So.
Okay, thank you very much. And as we spoke, as you just spoke about the inclusion, of everyone, then what is happening with diversity, equity, inclusion in your space? Because again, there's a lot of conversation surrounding it, especially with students of color and also just students in the rural areas. But how are we looking at equity different? Because it goes beyond just black and white. How are we looking at equity? So with that, I'm going to pose that question first to Dr. Glass. I know KDE is looking at equity differently. Just talk to us about what's happening with equity at the Kentucky Department of Education.
Thank you. A lot is the short answer. Yeah, so following on the heels of the State Board of Education's resolution on racial equity, when I came in, that was a charge that was given to me, is really prioritize this with the department staff. So we hired Dr. Woods Tucker as the department's first chief equity officer, and he's also serving as our associate commissioner over our division of teaching, office of teaching and learning. So great opportunity to bring equity into teaching and learning work that the department has going on, and so that was one of the first moves that I made. We were also fortunate to have the governor's office and lieutenant governor support us with $1 million of funds that they had available, move that over to the department to help support efforts around diversifying the educator workforce, and a partnership that we have with the Council on Postsecondary Education to develop training modules around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've been working on that for a year. The first of those is just rolling off, but there will eventually be 4 of those modules that are available to educators. And we're working on both a equity dashboard that looks at several high-level measures within districts. So those will be available for any district to look and see where they fall on some key metrics. And accompanying that, something that we're calling an equity playbook, which are high leverage, research-based strategies or changes that a district can undertake to improve equity. Things like how they're recruiting and assigning teachers, to what sorts of policies they may have, from special education identification to gifted and talented identification to educator assignment. So some practices like that. So a lot going on. We still have much to do and a long way to go, but I'm excited about the efforts that we have underway.
Thank you very much. Dr. Polio, we know that JCPS has a racial equity policy that's been put in place, but where are we? Can you give us an update on where JCPS is in terms of racial equity policy?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I think it's important to note the first time since we have probably spoken since we passed the racial equity policy and plan, that racial equity is under attack, and very vocally and outwardly under attack across the nation and right here at home in Louisville, Kentucky. And so I think it's important that we note that and all understand that if we value equity, it's important that we fight for equity, and specifically racial equity in the future, because it has died down a little bit, the discourse, since the summertime, but there is no doubt it will be coming back, especially around General Assembly time. So if we value these kind of conversations, if we value this work in our schools and in education, we have to be willing to stand up and say so and fight back against that. Our view around equity has been, probably the error, or definitely the error, that I think has happened across the United States and right here in Jefferson County Public Schools for many years, especially when discussing the achievement gap, is looking at one angle, one program, one initiative to solve problems that go back generations. And instead looking at everything we do from a racial equity lens. Racial equity is one of our pillars that should be around every decision we make. So starting with policy and decisions, we use a REAP, which is the Racial Equity Analysis Protocol, which is really a process that our leaders go through with their stakeholders to determine, how this decision is going to impact, obviously Black students first, but any type of students who might be at risk, but definitely from a racial equity standpoint. But then everything we are doing from a district is focused on racial equity. I think sometimes we just look at one or two, like we just look at hiring. Hiring is extremely important. We've made a lot of strides in hiring, especially administrators. Still have a long way to go with teachers to make them reflect our student population. But looking at every single angle from the curriculum, expanding the curriculum and being very intentional about the curriculum, making sure that our gifted and talented and AP programs directly reflect our student population, which has been a problem in this county and many counties for many, many years. Student assignment plan. I believe our student assignment plan is one of the most racially inequitable plans in America. I have said it. Obviously, the Courier ran some articles around it in the past 2 weeks that has really just said what I have said for the better part of 2 or 3 years, probably in a much better way than I have. But it is something that we must change. We must change our facilities, have a racial equity lens around facilities. I could go on, but these are things that we must do from every angle that we are working on now to eliminate the achievement gap in Jefferson County.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. Dr. Gonzalez, University of Louisville, what is the progress of the anti-racist agenda at the University of Louisville?
So, we call our anti-racist agenda Cardinals Against Racism agenda. That's what we call it by CARA. So we've tried to move into the culture with this belief of equity across all areas. Some of the isolated things that we've done is with the CARE agenda, they've identified 6 broad areas that we are measuring ourselves against to make sure that we do a better job. I think we hire people and then we have trouble retaining them. And so that's one of the things that we have to focus on really in this year and then the out years. The other thing that we need to improve on, and that's part of the agenda, is our student success for our underrepresented students. And I consider also our underprepared and under-resourced students. You know, we need to make sure we close the achievement gap that we call graduation rate to make sure they graduate at the same levels. So, you know, we do well with the programming. We have 3 mentored scholars programs for underrepresented students, and we just added more money to their operating. But it's the outcomes that we have to improve. That's one of the things. We have a lot of inputs, but we have to make sure our outputs are there. You know, University of Louisville has more underrepresented students than any other university in the state, at 25%. And we're known as a good place to study if you're Black, if you're Latinx, if you're LGBTQ, but it's not just got to be a great place to study. It's got to be a place that gets you out in the workforce with a good job when you graduate. So we have made progress. Most of our colleges and units now have a person who is at the table talking about DEI all the time. And before, it was just not there always. And so I think that's a good step forward. We started a program for our scholars and researchers called the Ascending Star Fellowship, where they're given time to study areas within diversity. And we've taken our high performing scholars and giving them a chance to prove themselves and to come up with research that changes the discipline. And then we just had finalized a handbook for recruitment of diverse individuals with a focus on women in science and underrepresented individuals. And so every time I do a search now, I charge the committee to follow that handbook, which includes bias training and understanding how from the beginning of the search process till the end, you have to be thinking of it through a diversity lens. We were really pleased this year to move all our cultural and specialized groups into a brand new center. It's in our new residence hall called the Belknap Residence Hall. It has the Women's Center, the LGBTQ Center, the Black Student Center. It has students for Latinx services, and it's just a gathering place for all our students. We talk about belonging, but sometimes if you don't see enough people that look like you, you don't feel like you belong. So that is one of our, I think one of the times that we finally said on the campus, we've heard you and now we're going to do something about it, because our students for years had been talking about the cultural center that we had before was inadequate. Now this is a lovely gathering space where students, faculty, staff can go and just be their authentic selves. So we have a long way to go on this, but I admire our president for saying, we're going to do the good work to get there, because if you set it out as a goal, we'll work toward it, as opposed to just saying it'd be nice if we did it. It's a hard lift, but it's one that we have to do. So, you know, I'm hoping if I were back here next year, I could talk about many more of our accomplishments in this area.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, NCPE, how are we dealing with diversity, equity, inclusion as we look at diversity in the workforce?
Well, as I mentioned, leading with President Thompson leading us, he is a nationally renowned expert in this space. So this is something that is always on the forefront for us. You're really maintaining a diverse student body and inclusive environment. It's essential for, you know, a college experience. You know, one of the things that CPE does, it requires every state school to have a diversity plan. So you can actually go to the CPE website and view every college's diversity plan. I think that's a step, keeping it on the forefront. And that's something that we strive to do. I think many of us know the John F. Kennedy quote, you know, rising tide lifts all boats. With that in mind, you know, we're working with each one of the schools to make sure that, you know, we're talking about the jobs that are coming. We are intentionally focused to make sure that traditionally underrepresented students are always also have those opportunities to be trained and prepared for some of those great jobs that are coming. You know, I'm not going to give you a bunch of stats, but we know that Black and Hispanic workers, they're actually right now, they're more prone to be occupying some of the jobs that may be done away with due to automation of the workforce. I did a talk on that yesterday, and the stats are very high. I do want to give you a couple of stats here. In the areas of cashier, customer service, store clerks, food preparation, janitors, cleaners, retail salespersons. All those are 17% or higher or right about that. Those are stats, and those are the jobs that are more likely to go away due to the automation of the workforce being replaced by new ways of doing business. Well, ironically, if you match that up, those are the same jobs that many underrepresented, primarily Black and Hispanic workers, people currently occupy. So we're intentional on working with our schools and making sure that we're going to try to change that gap. To close that gap. So we're preparing all of our students, not some of our students, but all of our students for the jobs of the future. So again, that's very high on CPE's importance areas right now. We're focusing on that. I think I'll stop there because I know Dr. Ellis, she's doing some great work in that area, and I don't want to steal anything that she's going to share with you.
Absolutely. And next time I'm going to have her go first before you.
Okay.
Dr. Ellis.
No worries at all. I'll just add on to Rick's comments. The other big piece of CPE before I touch on the continuum is also the performance funding, and has really placed a heavy emphasis on diversifying students who enroll in our public universities and colleges, as well as graduate. So very similar to the purview of U of L and their work towards ensuring students not only enroll, but they successfully complete and graduate, is exactly what CPE wants, and really has placed a heavy emphasis on low income and underrepresented minority students, of really providing wraparound services and support to ensure that there is a positive environment and opportunities to really excel, succeed, and complete. And so I would say that equity is the foundational piece of CPE. Hands down. And a part of that work that's really enhanced is thanks to obviously President Thompson, but also two others on this panel, which is Lieutenant Governor Coleman and Commissioner Glass, as being the three co-leads to our Commonwealth Education Continuum, which is really a gathering of about 30 people who are willing to really dig into ways that we can strengthen our education pipeline from preschool all the way through degrees and into post-secondary attainment and into the workforce. And a big piece of what we've talked about this year, specifically narrowing in on successful transition to post-secondary, is around advising support for students to help navigate what their opportunities are, and that they are worthy of obtaining degrees and credentials to seek to really go after the career goals that they may have and may not think is possible. We talk a lot about affordability, which is another barrier and can cause gaps, and ways that we can help promote opportunities for students to take advantage. We leave about $40 million on the table every year of federal dollars that are through the Pell Grants. We also have focused on early post-secondary opportunities. I forgot who mentioned it earlier, maybe Dr. Polio, but really a small percentage of our students really take advantage of dual credit or AP, advanced placement, international baccalaureate, seeking industry certifications, job shadowing. It's only about 25%. And so sometimes it's just access, and sometimes it's strictly opportunity. And so we really are going to be working towards expanding those opportunities. And a lot of that's communication and helping to find ways to increase the certification of teachers. There's lots of things that sometimes are just bumps in the road or barriers that can be addressed. And that's what we're committed to doing, as well as really focusing on, which Dr. Glass has talked about, so I won't repeat. There's a lot of efforts going around recruitment. Obviously, JCPS does a wonderful job of this, as well as other districts who are really focused on diversifying their teacher workforce. We recently had, we're getting to work with KDE on the modules, as well as offering the Commonwealth Educator Diversity Grants. And U of L was one of 3 recipients of that grant, to really work on ways to not only recruit a diverse teacher candidacy pool, but also to help retain and help succeed. And so we really want to learn from the different approaches. Northern Kentucky University was the other recipient, and Western Kentucky University, all 3 universities doing very different things and different strategies that we can all learn from, of how we really think differently about teacher recruitment and how we elevate the education field to a more diverse teacher workforce. And so there are lots and lots of ways that we're working on this, but really what we talk about in our whole basis of our conversations, I feel like from our P20 efforts in the discussion has really revolved around increasing quality and access to opportunities for all of our students to take advantage of. We have funding for dual credit. We have opportunities for the work study, or work ready, excuse me, scholarship, where you can earn an associate's degree for free. So there's not that financial barrier, but how do we elevate that to make sure folks know that they are eligible and they can really pursue different opportunities in our Commonwealth to reach the 60 by 30 goal, which is 60% of Kentuckians having some type of degree or credential by the year 2030. And we all have to work together on that, but that's really leveling some of the playing field, communicating better, and taking away some of the barriers. So that's just a few things to add on top of what my colleagues have already mentioned, but many of the folks on this call are very collaborative and working towards many of the same goals in the state, which I'm very grateful for.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you, Dr. Ellis, for your comments. And again, it's going to take a collective effort that everyone is working together, because we need all hands on deck to do this work. And speaking about doing the work, we know that there's a teacher shortage, and not just in Jefferson County, not just in the state of Kentucky, but across the country. So how do we move forward? What is the plan to be able to do that? Because we know that there was a teacher shortage before the pandemic. We know kids are suffering. And now with the pandemic, and now with a lack of certified teachers in classroom, that's coupled with all of that, what is the plan? What can we do to attract individuals to a teaching profession? We're going to start with Dr. Coleman. Lieutenant Governor Coleman. I know you're in this PhD program, so I'm just calling it out already.
I appreciate that, because I have not written my dissertation yet, but I'll take it.
And you will not be an ABD. You will not be an ABD.
There you go. Yeah, and as you kind of gave us the introduction today, when you pull it all together and think about all of the challenges that are going on right now and all the ways in which information, misinformation, social issues, all of those things collide in a school system, right? Because our schools are microcosms of their communities. And so as you started to kind of give us this intro, talking about everything that we've been through, literally the thought that entered my mind was, well, no wonder we have a teacher shortage, and we had one before the pandemic, but like everything else, all of those challenges that we faced, that we were moving at a snail's pace on. I think Dr. Polio mentioned that earlier. We finally got that sense of urgency that we've got to deal with this. We've got to take this on. And certainly the teaching shortage is one of those things. We also have to make sure that we are diversifying the teaching workforce as well. We've got a generation of kids who the first leader that they see outside of their home so often is their teacher. And there is a large population of our children who don't see themselves in those leaders. And to me, that's one of the greatest disservices we can do for our kids. And so not only do we need to obviously recruit and retain more teachers, we've also got to make sure that they reflect the student population. I think Dr. Glass mentioned that we invested $1 million into the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching, just for that reason. It had existed, but it was had kind of gone unfunded or underfunded for a long time. So we wanted to jumpstart that. But I do think that when we talk about valuing education, and not just in what it can do for you, but in the way that the people who dedicate their lives to it serve their communities, right? For so long, we've heard, it's particularly in Kentucky, during the last administration, we heard a lot of attacks on teachers that were, quite frankly, unfair. And I was a teacher at the time. And so it hit home for me. My husband is still teaching. So it hits home for me when people are disrespectful of the folks who get up every day to serve our kids and our communities. And so I think it's got to start at the top, which I'm grateful again that we have a governor who puts education first and who chose a lieutenant governor who's a teacher to be able to help with that. But I also think it's important that we put our money where our mouth is. When we talk about schools going underfunded, not having the resources that they need, teachers being underpaid, retirement is constantly under attack. That none of those things are bringing anybody else to our door. And so we've got to figure out how to combat that. And it's, I think the thing that I have take the biggest issue with here, and probably take the most personally, is that education is a calling. It is not for everybody. It certainly is not for the faint of heart. And it takes a special kind of person to take on that responsibility, because it's a huge responsibility. You've got the future of Kentucky's economy in your classroom. That's what you're tasked with as a teacher. And, when we think about what we're asking those folks to do, and then we turn around and we pile on all of the ills of society and ask them to fix that while they're at it, it's impossible. It's impossible to do. And so, one of the things that I know that we've really talked about a lot is adequately funding and equitably funding our schools. And when you do that, you have more adults in the building, you have more supervision, you have more support, you have more folks who can build relationships with kids. You have a community of folks who are in it for the same reason and can support each other. And so I don't want to, sell this short and say, well, the only answer is to fund schools, because it's not. But to turn the culture around and to show these teachers the value that they have. And I'll be honest with you, when the pandemic started, I really felt like when parents were at home with their kids, there was this sense of, oh my gosh, how do you do this every day? Talking about their kids' teachers. And it kind of makes me giggle when I think about that. But being grateful, showing our educators who are navigating unprecedented waters with inadequate resources, extending grace to them, right? And totally changing the narrative around teaching to where it's not something that we're just going to have to figure out. We're going to exploit that you feel called, and we're going to exploit your heart because we know you'll do it for, if we take these textbooks away or we take this technology away, you'll still do your job, right? That's got to stop. It's got to be, these people have the heart and they've answered the call, and we owe it to them to help them to do the best job they can with our kids. So it's cultural, it's monetary, and it starts at the top. And if there's anything that Governor Beshear and I are determined to do, it is to turn that around, both in word and action.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And I know Dr. Gonzalez has an award ceremony at 5, but I want to make sure that I get a question into her before she leaves. And that question is, what can the community do to help and support the University of Louisville and your efforts?
Well, I think that we make sure that our K-12 system is strong, because we want those students to come to us after they graduate. One of the things that I've found here, and I think a lot of people in Louisville will maybe attest to, it seems like some of our media covers the negative stories more than they cover our wins. And I think it's up to all of us to talk about the wins in our public school system and the wins that we're finding, in Louisville. And when I speak of Louisville, I speak because it's now my home, but Kentucky is my home as well. And I think we have to be champions of education for every student across our entire state. So, we have a lot of people with Louisville degrees here. So always talking about the Cardinal community and the Cardinal family is really good, and sending young people our way so that we can help finish shaping them or shape them more or give them more, so that we build a better world for children, grandchildren, and for our Commonwealth. So it's not so much as what you can do for Louisville, but what we can do for education from the time we teach a child to read all the way until she accepts her first job, and then maybe becomes the lieutenant governor later on in her life, or maybe even the governor. That's what we all can do for education. And I am honored every day to be part of this quest. And I'm honored to be on such an esteemed panel. So thank you for the invitation, and I'm sorry I have to leave, but let's all keep up our good work for our Commonwealth. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Geneva. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Dr. Handy, thank you for joining us. And we're happy that you're here. Can you hear me?
Yes, first let me say I'm sorry that I'm a little late to the party. We had a medical emergency today, and so
Okay.
I just got back, so I apologize.
Okay.
But I'm here now and we're good.
Oh,
And it wasn't
absolutely.
me.
And it's
That's
a pleasure to see you again as well. It's been a
Yes, good to
minute.
see
You
you,
know,
Geneva.
a question for you. Please share about the JCTC opportunity with Evolve 502. What does that mean, and what does that mean for our community, and what has it meant, and what are some of the great things that's happening there?
Yeah, sure. Let me start by explaining what Evolve 502 is. Around the country, there are probably a little over 200 communities that have stepped up with what we're calling Promise scholarships, which are last dollar in, full tuition scholarships for students who complete some series of requirements. In this case, the community of Louisville has stepped up to embrace what they're calling Evolve 502, and it's for JCPS graduates. And it covers the first 2 years of their community college education. And it's a last dollar in Promise scholarship. What makes it unique, I guess, two pieces that make it unique. One, very, very important, is that on the back end of this Promise scholarship, the University of Louisville and Neely Bendapudi stepped up and said, if you're successful in this program, we're going to honor it for your junior and senior year at U of L. That's highly unusual around the country. So we're glad to have that. And then the second sort of unique piece is that these scholarships oftentimes turn into what I'll call a middle class scholarship. Your poorest students wind up getting enough Pell Grant money or state financial aid that they don't need tuition support. And so no money actually flows to those students. It's those students in the, I'm going to say in the family income of 40 to 80 or 90,000 who actually benefit from these Promise scholarships. So what the U of L community has done, which is fairly unique, very few other places do this sort of thing, is they've stepped in with what they're calling an opportunity grant. And so students whose families make less than $40,000 a year are getting an extra $1,000 a semester to help cover textbooks, transportation costs, and things of that sort. So now what we hope to have happen, and what we want to see happen over time, is that the conversations that happen around the kitchen table between young children and their parents, who today might be saying, or previously might be saying, hey, you need to learn a skill, you're going to have to figure this out, we don't have the money to send you to college. And they start hearing that from kindergarten on, they're not going to have to hear that going forward. Or if they do, they're going to be able to say, no, wait a minute. My school is telling me about this scholarship that's out there. And if I succeed and graduate, my tuition is covered. So we're hoping we can change the conversation around the kitchen table with parents and families. And that has worked in other communities. Tennessee's probably the largest one, but there's a number of them around the country. So we're pleased to be a part of that. Actually, all KCTCS institutions and Simmons College are a part of Evolve 502. But right now it's for JCPS students. The community, through foundations and private support, has raised right at $20 million in either gifts already or pledges. And they've been able to make the promise. I believe they're down to the 8th grade level now. And so the current 8th graders have this promise all the way up, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And they're hoping to be able to make the promise all the way down to kindergartners.
Thank you very much for that. And the question is always, how do everyone get to know that these opportunities are available? Because we know that sometimes they're available, but the people who need to hear it or can benefit never hear this. So how does that happen? And Dr. Polio, you can jump in as well, because it's specifically for JCPS students. How does that work to make sure that everyone in this community is able to utilize or take advantage of that opportunity?
Well, certainly at this point right now, I think we have about 570 JCPS graduates who took advantage of it this year. That's just with Jefferson. There's more with Simmons, and there's several others in other institutions around the state. So the word did get out. We're relying largely on the JCPS counselors, principals, and our dual credit instructors. So we have over 2,000 students, high school students right now, enrolled in dual credit courses. So we have a marketing campaign that's out there. We have employees of JCPS. We have instructors from the college. And then, of course, we also have the Evolve 502 group themselves who are doing outreach. So students shouldn't have an issue knowing about the program and being able to access its benefits.
Yeah, I think Ty's exactly right. I mean, I think considering that we were out of school nearly the entire year last year as far as in-person school, and really only had our high school kids in person for about 14 school days at the end of the year, to know that we had nearly 600 kids receive this scholarship. That's about 10% of the graduating class. And I have to say, those are probably 600 kids who may not have accessed college before. I think that is a huge first year, considering the challenges that we were surrounded with. So this year, we want to see so many more, but really we'll monitor the applicants, but it is without a doubt training our counselors, which we have done, to make sure that they connect with every single JCPS grad and make sure that they know about this great opportunity.
Thank you
I
very
will say
much.
around the country, some modeling was done to anticipate how many students we might expect this first year. And the number that was being used and bantied about prior to COVID was about 700 students in the first year, based on what other promised scholarships had generated. And so to be at 560, coming out of COVID with the issues that Dr. Polio just mentioned, we're very pleased, and we're very confident that JCPS did a great job of getting the word out.
Thank you very much. As I spoke earlier about teacher shortage, Dr. Glass, how are we addressing that at KDE, the teacher shortage?
Well, it's a huge looming problem. I think we've gone from many years of being used to having a teacher shortage issue in math, science for labor market issues, special education because of the increased training and responsibilities associated with those roles, to now we're seeing shortages really across the board. And I think most of our schools were able to get their positions filled, but it wasn't because they had a glut of applicants. Was because they were able to find people at the last minute. Very few applicants for even elementary teaching roles in some cases. And a lot of our rural communities especially had to go with whoever applied and move forward. So that's a major challenge. You're not able to be selective at the point of hire. That's a huge problem. If we think about the long-term impacts and the quality of the educated workforce and the experiences that we can create for kids, it's something that we should all be concerned about. The Lieutenant Governor talked earlier about how teachers are in it for really altruistic reasons, that they want to help kids, they want to help their community, they want to contribute to the future. All those things are true. But teachers and are human beings, and they respond and pay attention to financial issues just like the rest of us. So there's a self-interest part that is also present for teachers. And it plays out when at the very beginning, when students are leaving our high schools or going into our colleges and universities, and they're thinking about careers. They see the way society, our politicians, the communities are talking about and treating teachers. They can see the long-term financial impact of teaching and what that looks like, and they're making other choices. And so we all need to be concerned about this if we value having trained, educated professionals and the best people, some of the brightest people in our society choosing teaching as a profession. This needs to be, and I don't mean to sound alarmist, but I am very concerned that we have, the train is way down the track on this problem coming at us. So it's something that we're going to have to take urgent action to solve. The Lieutenant Governor mentioned the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching. The department has an effort that we call Go Teach KY that's also aimed at trying to do something about this. Frankly, it's not enough. We are grateful for the governor's contribution of $1 million toward this problem. But as the Lieutenant Governor talked about, if you're not addressing the foundational salary issues that are where we're not able to offer a professional and livable wage to our teachers and people working in schools. You've got a systemic problem, and we have a systemic adequacy and equity problem in the way that we fund schools in Kentucky, and it's coming home to roost. So I, again, don't mean to sound alarmist, but I think this needs to be a major priority, and we need to work on this with some urgency.
Dr. Glasses, the urgency is now. So to your point, is not being alarmed, it's just that the urgency is now. And how do we change the trajectory to make some things happen differently? Mr. Smith, as we talk about CPE and the work that you're doing in workforce development, share with us some of the things that some of your concerns, or what can the community do to help you in the work that you're doing?
I think one of the things, let me first mention some of the things that we're really focused on. CPE is in process of rolling out a new strategic plan that's actually going in front of our board today, ironically, and I think you'll be hearing a lot about that here in the coming weeks and months. Particularly in the area of workforce development, we have two primary objectives, and that's to improve career outcomes of post-secondary graduates and increase research and service to support strong communities and economies. I say that because, you know, everything that you've talked about really in my area, the thing that keeps me up at night is thinking about how we could work on achieving those workforce needs, achieving those objectives that I just mentioned, and also to help to, again, meet the needs of this booming economy that we're starting to experience with the opportunities and all the great advances the governor's been talking about that are coming to Kentucky. So those things are extremely important. Keeping that pipeline going, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. So, you know, again, you know, work in both of those areas are things that, again, I am the area that I supervise in CPE is a relatively new area. Those things were identified because Dr. Thompson, our board, saw the need that you know, again, we have to have synergy between workforce and economic development.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And as we move forward with that, I'm thinking about the mental health crisis that continues to happen, and how do we take care of not only our students, but also our staff members as well. And so, Dr. Ellis, you know, what are some of the strategies, or what are some of the things that can be done to, you know, just to help people to realize the benefit of self-care?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I don't know that I'm the expert on it, but I will share what the efforts have been. I'll tell you that, because I think we're navigating it. You know, typically and we all know, those of us, which just about all of us are educators on the calls, we haven't in the past taken care of ourselves. We tend to be pretty sacrificial and think we can do it all. And because we have a whole lot of students and families to take care of. And that's where I think a lot of our burnout comes from, because we try to do it all. So I think the compensation is important in value. But I also think that the pandemic really brought to light that we are humans. Much of what has already been said, and how we really value that and preserve ourselves. And, you know, I do commend the schools, K-12 and post-secondary, in prioritizing mental health. You know, the things we hear from the universities are, we need more. We need more than telehealth. We need more individual assistance, because some people have really developed a lot of anxiety about going back out in public. There's a lot of fear in becoming ill. There's a lot of fear in large crowds, and things that may have already existed before that we just hadn't been aware of. And then just the fatigue of navigating what continues to feel like it's never going to end. And, you know, masking and the vaccinations, and really maintaining all that, and try to provide a normal environment for young students, or and reassuring families. You know, that is hard on the soul. And, you know, when we did have, you know, all the criteria come out that the governor and Dr. Stack had recommended for safety, and to try to get kids back in the classroom, which I could not agree more, is that I always said, if anybody can do it, K-12 can do it. Because we have managed through whooping cough and, you know, airborne allergies that could make kids incredibly ill. We administer all kinds of medication in emergencies. We have lots of equipment that really we were never equipped to use, but we learned how to use it to keep kids safe and ensure that they have a free and appropriate education. But this is at an all-time difficult level. and it keeps changing. You know, we're still learning. And so I think the thing that we have to do is not become complacent, or it becomes white noise to where we're not really paying attention to the needs. Because I think this was happening before. And I'll tell you, you know, speaking even to the teaching field and to the mental health piece, is that students watch and they listen. And so I think the Lieutenant Governor had said earlier, you know, they see the rough terrain we have. And you, Dr. Stark, had mentioned kind of our environment of all of the challenges. The other thing that the students have asked us, when it was when I was at KDE and the student advisory, they said, when you talk about education, you always talk about just one career pathway, and it's a great one. But you all have done some different things, even in the education field. What else could we do in education? How did you get where you are? How did you end up at KDE? How did you get to know these people and get to talk to us? And it kind of stopped us in our tracks a little at that time, because they said, you know, whenever we talk about other fields, we talk about the various career pathways within that field to impact more and more people and different avenues, whether you could teach at higher ed, or you can continue to teach in a classroom, be a teacher leader, be a principal, be a policy advisor for education policy. How do you do that? You all never tell us about that. And of course, the students call it out, don't they always? They're brutally honest. And that's why I love them. And I said, you're right. And they said, so how did you get to your job? You didn't quit education. You just kind of had some different pathways. And I think part of the retention piece on teachers and the mental health is to really give opportunities for growth. And it may not be formalized roles, but to even recognize our leadership within the building and the talents, to really look at the excellence under the roof, which is what I always called it, and to value that. Sometimes there are a lot of people with special skills who can make the environment and the culture of the school really powerful by finding where they belong, right? And what they can contribute to the environment instead of just doing what they always do every day. And sometimes that's a release, or just an opportunity to meet with other colleagues and admit the struggle, but find the things that they could do to elevate something in their culture that's unique, that can really be positive. And any of us who've been around for a while, you all know the number one piece of real change is the culture and the climate of how we just live every day within our schools and what our beliefs are and how we live those out. And I think we have been working so hard to get back to what we call normal, is that we have forgotten the value of our culture and the value of what everybody contributes to that school or to that district that really has so much to offer, because we're tired, you know, and it's very real. And so I don't say that as a judgment. I just say it as I think there's some things that may not require a mental health specialist in some areas, that just may be about reminding how we support each other, because we do know teaching is not for the faint of heart. I could not agree more with that. And you can't do it alone. You cannot be in education, be alone and do well. So, you know, I think we have to remind each other of that interdependence of how we elevate each other through different ways, because there's never going to be enough mental health counselors or small groups to meet all the needs that we have right now. So how can we invest in each other, and not to do more, but to survive together and to find the good out of it, because there's a lot of good going on, and there's a lot of innovation going on that folks just see as this is how I've learned how to do it a new way. And it's a forced innovation, but sometimes that's a positive one that really improves the outcomes for a lot of people. So I say that's not a direct answer to your question, Dr. Stark, but I feel like there's a lot of value in that, in the people who are in our buildings who are making it happen. And they may not have the role of a formal teacher, but I say everybody in a building teaches something. And they're all valuable. So I think we need to look internal, you know, and not forget that there's a lot of value.
Absolutely, you know, and we need to realize the value, everyone has value, and no one should be marginalized, minimized, or devalued. And whether that be the crossing guard, the custodian, the cafeteria worker, everyone is valued, and we need to make sure that we recognize all those individuals, because having a sense of belonging is very, very key. It's key to the work that has to be done. But also, there's a number of students who have lost parents to COVID-19. Is there any plan, or has anyone put a plan in place to be able to identify those individuals, and what steps is in place to try to help and support them in their efforts? Some of them may have lost both parents, and they're struggling in school buildings. Has any one of y'all can respond to that question? Don't let the teacher and me call on you. Okay, Dr. Glass.
Sure. Well, it's not something that we keep track of at the state level. So it would be going back and putting on my superintendent hat. It certainly would have been something that I would have known about in the communities where I worked through the district where I worked that had about 7,000 kids. I may have known the family directly and been able to be involved. In a larger district like the one Dr. Polio runs, you're really counting on your school staff, your school principals to be informed and supporting that family. Although, and Dr. Polio can speak to the structure that they have in Jefferson County. Often you've got district level support that's going out and working with school-based teams on the difficulties students may be having with emotional stress or depression or feelings of loneliness or being lost or economic concerns that the family may be going through because of loss of income. It really just depends on what the situation is and what impact that's had on the family. But the school is really has the relationship to put the supports in place from the school system.
Thank you very much. Now, we know that there is a lot of money out there, ESSA funds. What are some of the ways that those funds are being used to connect with the community to strengthen our school systems and our organizations? What are some of the ways that we are using those funds? And we can start with Lieutenant Governor Coleman.
So I know a lot of the ESSER funds and probably Commissioner Glass and certainly Dr. Polio can speak up to the more specifics of ESSER, but I know a lot of that is going to go towards a lot of teaching and learning supports to help students who may have fallen behind over the last year, because certainly not every student had the same amount of support outside of school. But what I can speak to is the governor's discretionary fund. We received about a little over $19 million in gear funding, and the governor could have used that for anything that he wanted. It was totally at his discretion. And so he called me in. He said, what do we want to do with this? And I said, I'll tell you exactly what we need to do with this. The schools are, because Dr. Glass and I had worked closely on all of these dollars that were coming from the federal level and how they would be distributed, both to public and private schools, quite frankly. And what we were missing is that mental health, social and emotional well-being piece. Certainly our schools need those dollars for academic support, but they also need support. They also need dollars to support the whole child. And so working together, the governor and I utilized our family resource youth service centers in all of the districts. And I wish people in our communities knew what those centers do every day, because they are angels on earth. I'm here to tell you, they do remarkable work. And so we were grateful to partner with them and utilize those dollars to support any number of initiatives, from connecting working parents to childcare if they didn't have access, connecting mental health clinicians with students, but also with students' families where they were needed. We recognize that the students who had the least amount of resources were the ones who suffered the most when it came to college and career readiness at the end of their high school career. And so by missing out on that access to guidance counselors and maybe the college days when representatives come in and visit the schools, so we worked with CPE as well as KDE to create bridge programs, summer bridge programs for the students who were marginalized, kids of color, low socioeconomic status students that needed that support to get across to the college campus, to help them get acquainted and situated, and also to create that relationship to help them stay and to be successful and to graduate. And so everything from early childhood to mental health to college and career preparation was included. We really we squeezed as much as we could squeeze out of that, almost $20 million. And if it had not been for the partnerships with our Friskies, with CPE, with KDE, it would not have been possible. But you can rest assured that every penny of that gear fund that came through the governor's office was put to good use for social and emotional well-being.
Thank you very much. Dr. Polio, any partnerships with community individuals, that organizations that you can share with us, that to give us some examples of the partnership with the community?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And then I'd like to conclude these comments, if I could, just to circle back to teacher shortage for a minute or two, if I could, if you don't
Yes.
mind. But first of all, with ESSER funds, I have to say this, it's important to note, when we did our original plan and submitted our plan to the Kentucky Department of Education, we're finishing that up in June. At that time, we were thinking that the COVID mitigation part of the funds were coming to an end. Cases were dropping. We weren't aware of this Delta variant. We thought this school year would look very much like prior to COVID school years. And so, really the two pots we are looking at spending the ESSER funds, number one is COVID mitigation, keeping COVID out of schools, keeping kids safe, contact tracing, quarantining, testing, making sure that we increase pay so that people can get to, our schools and help us, whether that's subs, bus drivers, all of those things. And then the second one is supporting kids in that lost learning time, I like to say, or wraparound service for kids to make up for what is caused by COVID. Unfortunately, this year has probably been more intense in the use of COVID funds for the mitigation purposes than any time before. So the longer we are in the COVID, the longer we have people that aren't taking the vaccination, the longer we have spread, the less ESSER funds we will have for the second part of this journey, which is catching kids up. However, for us, it is really about ensuring that we partner with what our main focus here is to really establish additional learning time for students moving forward. And that comes in several ways. So first of all, making sure that we offer robust summer programs. Right now, we know that kids that are behind, we have to acknowledge there is an attendance crisis in our nation right now. Kids that are behind are missing a third more days than kids that are on, grade level, so to speak. And so our educators are trying to catch kids up that are coming to school 10, 15, 20 less days than their peers. And so first of all, we've got to mitigate that attendance crisis. And second of all, we've got to get kids more hours of learning, but doing it in a fun, engaging way. So we need 10, 20, 30,000 kids in summer learning programs in JCPS over the next several years. We set a record this past summer with 6,000 kids in summer learning program. That came directly as a result of ESSER funding. But then second of all, looking to partner with all of our community hubs and the Louisville Urban League specifically to really focus on opening up more community hubs, us and JCPS opening up what we are calling our academic support centers that are called Elevate, which means we will have teachers on staff in our hubs from 2:30 to 8:30 every single day, the entire school year. So our kids will have access to certified teachers, from 7:30 in the morning till 8:30 at night moving forward as we kick these off with this high intense tutoring, and then working with a partner like Louisville Urban League to ensure that their focus as well is on tutoring young people and getting them the academic skills they need. But we have partnered with over 108 community partners to offer hubs, and through Evolve 502, who I have to note has been a great partner with us through this entire process to ensure kids are getting extra time. So finally, I wanted to circle back quickly to the teacher shortage, because I'm very passionate about this. And I want to follow up on what Dr. Glass said really about the chickens coming home to roost, because that is clearly what is happening here. And it is way too much of a trend in our nation. When we have a problem, that is a societal ill or a community-wide problem across the nation, and we turn to schools, districts, and educators to fix that problem. And this is exactly what the teacher shortage is. So we have to work as hard as we can to mitigate the short-term problem. But we can never expect that over the past 2 decades, public schools and specifically teachers have been under attack. And then we wonder why our children don't want to go into teaching. You know, there is not, throughout NTI, you couldn't get onto a website, social media, anything about education without someone talking about the laziness of educators and teachers. And if we don't think that has a significant impact on kids choosing to do that, we are fooling ourselves. Or the attacks on public schools are failing. We have bad schools versus good schools. People are giving their lives to do that. And when we say that's a bad school or a failing school, there are educators who go there every day and give everything they have to support kids in crisis. And we are calling them a failure, and we wonder why it's hard to staff schools. I had at Dawes High School, I had a general from the Air Force who decided as a retirement to teach. He taught for me for 2 years and worked as hard as he could. He finished and said, I promise you, this is the hardest job I've ever had. And I've been in multiple wars. This is the hardest job I've ever had, is to be a teacher in an urban setting to meet the needs of kids. So we have to start recognizing that. We have to stop the attack on public education. If we don't, this crisis is only going to continue. And I see a future down the road. I mean, we could have 40, 50, 60 kids in a classroom because we don't have enough teachers to support them. We must stop this in our nation and really honor and professionalize, you know, teachers as a whole if we expect them to circle back to us.
Thank you, Dr. Polio, for your words. Dr. Handy, any parting comments as we near that, 5:30 hour?
You know, I think I would just simply echo what Dr. Polio has said about the teaching profession in general. In higher education, we're facing that same challenge as well. And as an institution that really prides itself on its diversity, that's been an additional challenge for us, is keeping faculty of color. There's a lot of demand out there for teachers right now. People are getting cherry picked. I've got perpetual nursing faculty and advanced manufacturing faculty and aviation faculty positions that are open constantly. And we can't afford to pay, what they can earn in industry. These are, we can't compete with the market like that, or at least we haven't been able to. And the challenges that presents in terms of developing the pipeline of students and graduates to fill these jobs that are so in demand today is tragic right now. And COVID has exacerbated that problem. And I'm not sure what the way forward is, because right now I don't see sort of a public understanding of how deep this problem is. And it's not a problem that can be solved in 6 months, 9 months. It took years to get to the point where it's at today. And it's going to take years to turn this around. And it's going to take a cultural shift in terms of how we value those people who are teaching our children.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mr. Smith, any parting words?
Yeah, I just want to get back to your question. I don't think I fully answered the question you asked me before about what can you do, as I was talking about some of the work CPE. I think from the public standpoint, what can they do to support post-secondary education? What can they do to support CPE and our great work? I think it's encourage college enrollment. I think we need to change the nomenclature. People think about going to college. College is not just a 4-year degree. College could be a 2-year degree. College could be, or post-secondary degree. It could be a workforce certification. So maybe a 4-year college is not for everyone, but I think that there's that misnomer out there that, a college is just going for 4 years. It's not just that. So encourage people to seek a post-secondary credential. Employers provide job shadowing, apprenticeships, internships. Our students need to get out into the workforce and get a firsthand view of what it's like to be in the workforce and get that great experience. There's nothing like experience. We do a great job of academically preparing our students, but they need to have practical experience. And finally, advocate for higher education funding. Dr. Polio, others, we've talked about, the need for for funding in various areas. Certainly we need that in the post-secondary area as well. And especially we need money for financial aid. So many students just don't have access. So we need to be able to give them that way to go to school. We have some great programs that providing access to some students, but we need to make sure that all students have that access.
Absolutely. And that's what I mentioned earlier about making sure that everyone gets the information, because even though those programs are out there, many people don't have the access and opportunity. So with that being said, I'm going to go to Dr. Ellis before Dr. Ellis, you're next, and then Dr. Glass.
Specific to which topic? We've jumped topics a few times.
We're going to go with your parting comments. As we near that time.
If it's, I've written down lots of comments actually about our teacher workforce and what was the topic before? I'm so sorry, Dr. Stark.
Okay.
I have
What it
notes.
is that as we are nearing the ending time, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to be able to share some parting words with the.
I'm sorry, my apologies.
Okay.
That's why I got to quit taking notes from my colleagues. But no, I think what is interesting to me from this conversation this afternoon, evening, is that there's some common issues across, which is why collaboration is essential and
Absolutely. Communication
is essential. And even hearing from our community college and our four-year institutions and our K-12, the needs that we have sound very similar. Our passion for the communication and the needs to provide opportunities for more students and more individuals in our state, it seems pretty common to me, which to me just goes back to why we are convening as a group and having hard conversations and being able to carry that message through with policymakers in our community. And so I'm grateful for the conversation. I'm grateful for the honesty of the real struggles and for those who've really found ways to make things work through such difficult times. And I think what the other thing that's really fascinating to me is even when we are lacking resources, someone has resources. And so we're able to work together. We are grateful for being able to partner with KDE and their generosity of sharing ESSER dollars for us to be able to do things. The same with Lieutenant Governor and the GEARD funds, being able to execute the summer bridge programs, to make those available. We handed out 21 of those grants this past spring, and we'll get to do it for the next 2 years to really help students transition and wrap their heads around more change. That is a collaborative effort we could not do alone. And it is a need that doesn't start just when students enter a post-secondary institution, but it's needs from when they're younger, and how we continue to provide that wraparound support throughout the whole pipeline. So it's not an end and it's your responsibility, now good luck, but as how we pass the baton of care and wraparound support to help students see success and to move into their adult life and into careers that will be successful in contributing citizens of Kentucky that then turn around and often give back to the same cycle. And so I just find today affirming really of some weariness and some struggles, but also affirmation of support and passion for what needs to be done and recognition of what we really need to pursue as a state, and that we are not alone. And so I do appreciate the conversation today. And Dr. Stark, thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely, and I think we need all hands on deck, and we can work. If we work together, then we can get things done and not work in isolation. So we're going to go with Dr. Glass, and then we're going to end with our Lieutenant Governor.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stark Pittman, for organizing this and for the great conversation. Thanks also to the great panelists that we've had. We took on some difficult issues. When you read off the list of things that you intended to cover at the beginning, I was skeptical. We're not going to get through all this, but I think you did it. You pulled us through. And we got into some hard conversations, and there's a sense of sort of all of the weight of things that we're trying to carry right now. But we also should know that we've got really talented people in Kentucky, really bright people. And we've been through hard times before, and we are in hard times now. We're gonna come through this. I'm excited about the future of education in Kentucky, particularly because we're finally to a point where we're talking about changing the experience of students as the primary point of change. And if we can change what our students experience in a way that prepares them for the exciting lightning fast world that they're inheriting. That's going to be so much change and dynamic activity that we can't even imagine how exciting that world's going to be. If we can make that our focus and keep our focus on the experience of our kids, that is going to make a difference. If we can't change what our student experiences are, then nothing else really matters. But I believe that we can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Glass. And Lieutenant Governor Coleman.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me and putting this great panel together. It's been great to hear from all of you as well. But I would just simply say this: we are at a crossroads right now. We're coming out of a once in a lifetime global pandemic, and here in Kentucky, we are looking ahead to unprecedented economic growth in Kentucky. So much so that I saw a chamber report earlier that says that for every unemployed person in Kentucky, we have 2 jobs available. And so the workforce is there, economic opportunity is there, and we have the world by the tail if we want it. But our success from this moment forward is going to hinge on 2 things. 1, how we treat our kids, and 2, how we treat the people who take care of our kids.
Correct. Absolutely. And this is going to be days that we have to lean on each other. And it's going to be days that we have to lift each other. And so if we keep that in mind and keep that and be intentional about that, to know that, and also we're going to make mistakes along the way, then we can get there, but we can't do it in isolation. We can't do it by ourselves. And so we just need to know that and be able to lean on each other. Again, I want to thank you all for being here today, because many individuals across the state, when I shared the questions, they reached out. And also this is going to be taped for those individuals who couldn't be present today. It'll be on the Nystrand Center website, because many individuals take it, they use it in their classrooms, or people use it in communities. But I want to make sure that they have an opportunity to be able to hear from the great leaders in the state of Kentucky, because for many people it's gloom and doom, but they need to know that there's hope. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and we are working very, very hard to make it happen for our kids, because many times kids are looking at who's fighting for us, and they need to know that we are fighting for them every day. And sometimes we're not taking care of ourselves. We are fighting for them. So again, I want to thank you all. Thank you all for being here today. Truly, truly appreciate it. Bye, everyone.